This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Twilight Show. I'm Graham, speaking to you live from Mexico City. Joining me today is Ana Pires, an English teacher, language educator based in Portugal. Ana is a teacher trainer and materials writer who is about to move from full-time employment to become a freelancer. We'll be talking about her career and how she feels about this move.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Twilight Show, everyone. On today's show, I'll be talking, as I said, to Ana Pires, who is an English language teacher, teacher educator, and coursebook writer. Ana is someone who has been in my orbit for some time, but we've never actually met. We've been following each other on social media for years and have a shared love of music, and I thought it was about time we spoke, and so invited her to be on the show. Turns out this particular time is a very important one for Ana. After 25 years working for the same school as a teacher, trainer, and assistant director of studies, she's about to make the move to become a full-time freelance consultant. Ana has been writing materials and course books for some time now, but has always combined it with teaching in the school where she works in Braga, Portugal. Now, after finding it difficult to combine the two, she's decided to take the plunge and fully committing to fully commit herself to becoming or to being a freelancer. I'll be talking to Ana about this and about how she became a teacher and how her career path developed, and much more, all after the Teachers Talk Radio news.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC reports that 1 in 3 primary schools has no male teachers. The study by the Warwick Business School says the proportion of schools without a male classroom teacher has increased in the last 12 months. The report's author, Dr. Joshua Fullard, said this lack of male teachers was bad for pupils. Dr. Fullard is Assistant Professor of Behavioural Science at Warwick Business School. He went on to say that there is a large body of research that shows students benefit from being educated by a teacher with certain similarities to them. The report also found that schools in special measures are less likely to have a male classroom teacher. In total, the report found that 24.3% of all state schools in England had no male classroom teachers. The report called for teachers' pay to be raised by more than 10% and for a merit-based reduction in tuition fees for university-led teacher training to be introduced. Julie McCulloch, Director of Policy for ASCL Union, said more needed to be done to attract men and women alike, and a spokesperson for the DfE said the department wanted the profession to be inclusive. North East Child Poverty Commission website reports that new figures published by the DFE confirm that more than 3 in 10 pupils across the North East are now registered for free school meals. This is an increase from January 2022. It remains the highest proportion of any part of England. The figure of 30.4% is compared with 18.8% of pupils in the South East and 19.4% in the east of England. The England-wide rate is 23.8%. All regions have seen a significant increase in the number and share of children eligible for free school meals over the last 7 years. The Guardian reports children's enjoyment of writing has fallen to crisis point, following research completed by the National Literacy Trust. The charity says an alarmingly low level of children and young people enjoy writing. The research was conducted across the UK. 34.6% of young people aged 8 to 18 said that they enjoy writing in their free time. Although 3 in 4 children starting school said that they enjoyed writing, this dropped to 1 in 4 by the age of 16. The Children's and Young People's Writing Report is drawn from over 70,000 responses from children to the charity's annual literacy survey. The number of children who say they enjoy writing in their free time has dropped by 12.2% in the 13 years since the survey began. Young people do report that they write to improve mental health and well-being and to support causes or issues they care about. Full details can be found on the National Literacy Trust website. Finally, Microsoft News reports that Taiwan has made the move to use generative artificial intelligence, or AI, to help students learn English. Teachers in the country often report that students read and write better than they speak English, as shyness and a lack of practice can hinder oral communication. A new chatbot has been funded by Taiwan's Ministry of Education to help pupils get the practice they need. The Coolie bot allows pupils to speak person to AI and build up conversation on preset topics. It also assesses punctuation, accuracy, and fluency. Taiwan has set a goal of becoming bilingual in Chinese and English by 2030. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing, Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm going to ask you a question. Do you use presentation software to help you deliver your lessons? 99% of you will be saying yes at this point. Have you ever considered how many presentations the average pupil in your school sees in a day, in a week, or even in their entire school life? Considering a typical secondary education, with a bit of rough maths, over a week with 5 lessons a day, there's potential to see 25 presentations. That's 100 presentations in just 4 weeks. I've left out any additional presentations like assemblies and visitors, etc. Working on a 38-week year, that's a whopping 950 presentations a year. That's a lot of presentations. Now, let's throw in some schools have a standardized slide theme and set layouts. Now we have 950 exactly the same lesson beginnings. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but do we really know what experience a pupil gets through a typical week in school? Are they being engaged, or are they being presented with the same visual stimulus day in, day out, simply causing them to fly below the radar? If you're like me, you're now thinking, how do I make my presentation stand out? Is there a presentation software out there that's better than all the rest? In my humble opinion, this is like the visualizer versus HD webcam argument. What works for some does not work for others because all subjects are not the same, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but please bear in mind that what works for one teacher may not work for another. A search for free presentation software returns no less than 24 apps I recognise. Some are interactive like Mentimeter, others have more dynamic transitions like Prezi. Most also have additional features and add-ons you can purchase. I know what you're saying, come on Steve, which is the best though? Well, the answer is simple, but I've run out of time, so I'll have to tell you next week. In the meantime, please consider the number of presentations a typical pupil subjected to in your school. Does this need to change, or does it work? And how do you know? Do you have a preferred presentation software, and what are the features that make it stand out for you? Let us know at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, and thank you, Anna Puresh, for joining me today. How are you today, Anna?
I'm great. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so honored to be here speaking with you. And yeah, doing good. Thank you.
The honor is all mine, believe me. And so I'd love to know, Anna, a little bit more about you and your reasons for becoming a teacher. I think it's really interesting to hear from people about how they got involved in education. So what was it in your case?
Well, I have to be honest. I never planned to become a teacher. I can't say it was my dream. It was probably when I was younger, the last thing on my list. My passion, as you probably know, was always music. So when I was younger, I always thought I was going to be a rock star, even though I can't sing.
Who are your heroes as far as rock or music's concerned?
Definitely Bruce Springsteen. I'm a huge fan of the band. I don't know if people are familiar with the band, but I'm a huge fan, and yeah, definitely Bruce Springsteen, but also not rock, but Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, all these different. Dolly Parton. I mean, I'm very eclectic when it comes to music. I like the Arcade Fire. There's so many different.
So I detect a lot of Canadians in that list.
There are a lot of Canadians, the new pornographers.
Is there a reason for that?
It's not because they're Canadian. It's just that we have really good bands. We've got really good singers, and people are not even aware that they're Canadian. You know, they just assume they're American. But we've got great music, and also great country music, which I love country music. I actually, just on a side note here, I grew up in a bar. My family owned a hotel with a bar. And they had live music because bars in Canada have live music, because it's an interesting thing. If you have live Canadian bands playing, your liquor license is cheaper.
Okay.
Which I think is brilliant because it's a way of showcasing Canadian artists, you know.
That's wonderful. Wonderful idea.
I think it's brilliant. And that leads to other opportunities for these bands and singers. Yeah, I actually got to know one of my good friends used to play with Shania Twain, you know.
Oh, wow. Wonderful.
That's my little connection with fame, the music world.
And did you do much, if any, singing or playing an instrument, etc., when you were growing up?
I sang in the choir at church, and that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a rock star at church.
Oh, wonderful. And then how did you then, what made you move into education then? Was
there's quite a leap there, isn't there?
Yeah, from rock star at church to teacher.
Actually, in between, there was theater. That's my greatest passion. So I was part of the drama club. I did acting, but it wasn't just acting. I loved everything behind the scenes, behind the curtains, script writing, adaptations. I loved all sorts of genres. I loved comedy. That was a big thing for me. Not that I'm funny, but I loved comedy, and I always imagined my life in theater. That's what I thought I'd be doing in the future. But I am the daughter of Portuguese people who immigrated, Portuguese parents who immigrated to Canada to flee poverty, extreme poverty, and a dictatorship.
Right. So you grew up.
My parents.
You grew up in Canada then.
I grew up in Canada, in Toronto.
In Toronto.
As we say, Toronto.
Toronto.
Toronto. And I grew up in the Portuguese community, which was kind of like a bubble. You know, it's very closed. Well, you know, the immigrant communities, we had Portuguese community, Italian community, Greek community. And it was interesting because when the revolution took place in Portugal and we became a democracy, nobody was aware in the Portuguese community in Canada that we were a democracy, and things continued kind
Wow.
of like in the times of the dictatorship, very conservative community. But my
Interesting.
parent, yeah, and they're much more I don't know now, but they were much, much more conservative than Portuguese people here, actually. But my parents were obsessed with education, and that's one of the main reasons that they immigrated to Canada, to be able to give their children, in this case, their only daughter, chances, opportunities for good education. My mother was a cleaner,
Mhm.
and she just completed third grade. That was her education. My father, he had dreams of studying. My father dreamed of going to university, becoming a teacher.
Oh, wow.
But he didn't have that opportunity. So he joined
Mm.
them. He was in the military just in order to complete the sixth grade. Can you imagine just going
Wow.
to the military just to get a bit more education, which is not a lot, the sixth grade, but that meant a lot to my father.
Mm.
So education was always a big topic at home. For my parents, the pillars of society was education and health. And they were really involved in my own education, although they didn't speak English at all.
Right.
But they were always in school. They always took part in events. They got to know my teachers. I mean, my school was in the Portuguese community, so there were people in the school that did speak Portuguese.
So it was like a
my parents.
bilingual school then.
Well, actually, well, no, it followed the Canadian system. It was a Catholic school.
Mhm.
Anyway, that was a challenge for me. But because most of the students were Portuguese, came from a Portuguese background, they hired teachers that were second generation, so that they would be able to communicate with parents. And also there were a lot of students who came to Portugal. They had ESL, they were
Right.
learning English.
So do you remember when you were at school being in that sort of bilingual environment?
Absolutely, yeah.
Interesting.
What was interesting was the community I lived in was mostly Azorians from the Azores.
Mhm.
There are very few people from the continent.
Right.
I actually always thought that Portugal was the Azores and the continent was an island, just a tiny place in Portugal. And a lot of them, they dropped out of school because the idea was to get into the workforce.
Right.
And they mostly spoke English at home, which was quite interesting.
Mhm.
I don't know why. But my parents were really big on Portuguese only at home. As soon as I walked in the door, I could only speak Portuguese.
And that's
And I was
because
also,
that's because they didn't speak English, or just because they thought they really wanted you to be able to not lose that
yeah.
ability.
My dad, who was a big influence on my education, my dad wanted me to be aware of my roots.
Mhm.
For
Mhm.
him, I was Portuguese first, Canadian second. And so he made such a big deal of me being in touch with my roots, so much that he enrolled me in Portuguese school. But it's not like language schools. I actually followed the Portuguese curriculum. I did
Okay.
Portuguese exams. So every day I had normal classes at Canadian school, and then I went to Portuguese school 2 hours a day. So
So you had
it was
two
a
lots
lot
of
of work.
schooling, basically.
I did both schools, yeah, and it
So it's
was
not,
a lot of work.
yeah, it's not surprising you ended up being a teacher, having that much exposure to education, I suppose.
Yeah, and because my dad, wanted to be a teacher, I'm
So
not a teacher
I bet
for him,
he was
but
very
because of,
proud. He was very proud of you when you became a teacher.
yeah, he was very, very proud. And he was just proud of my own education, and just completing university was such a big deal. I was the first person in his family to get a university degree, which is quite something, back then,
course, yeah.
poverty, dictatorship, having no access to education. So yeah, my dad was really proud of that, and the fact that I later became involved in politics. That was another thing.
So how did you end up being back in Portugal then after growing up in Canada? Did the whole family move back?
Well, actually, it was a tragic event because my
Oh.
parents were here on holidays. They used to come, as I said, my mother was a cleaner, but my dad worked in construction. I'm very proud of my parents
Yes,
and
of
very
course.
proud of what they did and how much they accomplished. But my dad worked in construction, so you can imagine that in Canada, winters are really difficult for a carpenter to be working outside. So
of course.
they would come to Portugal, and my dad was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh dear.
And because he broke a leg and it was bone cancer, and he quickly had to have his leg amputated. So, I had to leave everything and come running, to be here. And it wasn't even, I didn't have a culture shock because of.
So they'd moved back then to Portugal when you were.
So they were on holidays, and
they were on
because of the
holiday. Okay,
yeah,
right.
because of the cancer, and it was so quick. There was no time to go back to Canada to seek medical help.
Right.
My dad had his leg amputated here, and I just left everything in Canada to be here with my family. Then eventually, I met a guy, fell in love, and ended up
As it happens.
I don't know why he should have followed me back to Canada, but anyway, I decided, because I was saying there wasn't a culture shock for me,
right?
Because of my Portuguese roots and because I spoke Portuguese fluently, and so yeah, it was easy to adapt, and I ended up staying here, and yeah, it's great.
Wonderful. And then, so you started teaching when you were in Portugal then?
Oh, well, actually, I started at the time, being bilingual and being fluent in English was such an asset, because nobody spoke English back then. Nobody,
I can imagine.
You couldn't find bilingual people. So in the corporate world, in business, it was, I got a job in a multinational textile company. It was German. I went from a degree in education, to working in a German company, and yes, traveling and doing all the work in English. So that was fascinating. I got a lot of experience from that. That then made its way into my teaching. So yeah, that was interesting. And then I decided, I decided to be a teacher, and that's what I'm going to do. So I went into public education. I was teaching in public schools, which is something I did for 6 years.
Primary or secondary or?
Middle school and secondary, yeah. Even though I'm trained as a primary school teacher, I don't know how I ended up with those age groups and later adults. You never know what's going to happen in the future.
Of course. And you were working as an English teacher then in middle school, were you?
Yeah, so I was working as a teacher in the public sector, which was quite an experience. But it was also difficult because it meant there was no stability at the time. So it meant moving around a lot. I never got to connect with the school completely because, and with the students, because every year I'd be going to a new school. And that was really difficult for me because some people don't know that I'm extremely shy. So making new friends and, creating your network there, it was difficult for me because I was meeting new colleagues, working with new people. every year, working in a different context. So yeah, I found that I didn't want to do that. And working with 30 students, I found that quite challenging, and kind of
So
took the easy road and went
you
in,
moved into private language education, is that right?
which I still feel extremely guilty for having done that. And
Well, you shouldn't feel guilty, I think.
I regret that. That's one of my regrets. Because I think I could have done more in public education. I would have made a greater contribution to society. And so that's a little bit of guilt that I carry around with me. I try to make up for it with other areas I'm involved in.
I don't think you should be guilty. I think I'm sure you working as a teacher where you worked was beneficial to hundreds and hundreds of students, I'm sure.
But it's different, it's a very privileged situation working, going from working with 30 students from low income families with very troubled backgrounds to going to a context where I'm working with 15 students, with a different background. So yeah, it was a big change.
Of course.
So I feel very privileged in that sense, and it enabled me to do things that I would never have been able to do in public education.
Of course. So what about if I were to ask you about your accomplishments as a teacher, what do you think your major accomplishments have been?
Sorry, I'm laughing.
What are you most happy about?
I think it's easier to talk about failures than accomplishments. But then when you think about accomplishments, they come from failures, don't they?
Yeah.
So I think my greatest accomplishment is my connection with students.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with really English teaching. It has to do with building connections with my students, community building in the classroom. I mean, some people say, I don't care if my students like me. I want my students to like me.
Of course.
Before I go into a new class, I look at the register, I look at the list, and I go into this mindset of, I like them already. I don't know them, but I like them already. But it goes back to a failure.
Oh, really?
I don't know if I can talk about that.
Yeah, please do.
My first year teaching, and this was public school, I don't know why they did it, but they threw rookies into the deep end.
Right.
So there was no mentoring. There was no help, you got to learn it on your own. You have to go through difficulties. That's how we learn. So I had a very, very, very difficult class of fifth graders. I had 26 boys and one girl.
Wow.
And these boys were not the age you would expect in the fifth grade. They were teenagers, most of them,
really?
Simply because
they were repeating, were they?
Yeah, the system didn't work for them, and they came from difficult backgrounds, and they were a challenge. And when you're beginning, the greatest difficulty is not actually teaching English or the content. It's classroom management.
Of course.
And if you don't have somebody helping you, my God, it is so difficult. So I was thrown into this class and I was terrified of them, some of them, and I looked too young.
Right.
I even started dressing differently
to look older.
To look older and
really
more mature and authority. It didn't work, Graham.
Oh, really?
They can sniff the fear. And it was very difficult. So I remember
I can empathize with that. When I was living and working as a teacher in Barcelona, at one point I worked in a school of tourism and catering. and I did morning classes with groups of 40 catering
Oh my
students
gosh.
who didn't want to
Yeah.
be there.
The problem is they don't want to be there. And how do
And
you reach these
they,
students?
well, they spent it's exactly what you were saying. Is like the biggest challenge is just getting them to concentrate and just getting them to stop hitting each other and shouting at each other was the biggest challenge. So
and beating each other up in the
yes,
classroom.
exactly. But it was quite interesting is that there was a level of discipline in the catering college that they were able to instill in them, because they had them every day, all day, and they were training a lot of them to be waiters and chefs.
Right.
It's like it was a 2-year course. So by the start of the second year, they were pretty much more receptive. But at the beginning, it was just like completely chaos. I don't know if that was the case with your students. But...
Yeah, and you know how that feels as a teacher. How do I get to these students? I was so scared of them, Grant. I was terrified. I'm embarrassed to tell this story.
No, it's interesting. I think it's important to reflect upon these things and for other teachers to hear it, I think.
They actually threw things at me. So whenever I was writing on the board, paper airplanes, it was so terrifying.
At least it was only paper airplanes.
Yeah, I don't know if there
could
were
have been
other
worse.
Things, but I can't remember. This is 30 years ago. But I was terrified of writing on the board because I had my back to them and I had no idea what was happening. So I mastered the skill of writing on the board while looking at the students. I can still do that.
Yeah. I had to do that in my situation with the catering students as well. So I can empathize with you.
It's completely. A skill I've mastered and still use today. But I was so scared of them that I would never take my coat off like in winter. My handbag would be on the desk. And the door was always open. So if something happened, I was ready to grab my handbag and just run out the door. It never happened, but it came close to that.
Oh, wow.
But they were really difficult. And I was trying to teach English, and I just got to the point where I can't teach. There's no point in trying to teach English if they're not interested.
Yeah,
they're not listening
very frustrating.
to me. And they're not connected to me at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it became survival mode.
Yeah. And so then you don't feel like you're really accomplishing anything by being there with them.
No, I studied to be an English teacher, first year teaching, and this is what I'm dealing with. So I realized I had to connect with the class, and just, my ambitions of teaching English were put aside completely. Which is quite scary as well. So I tried. I don't know if I did the right thing. I mean, again, you go into survival mode.
Of course.
And I tried to win over the leader of the pack, which with hard work I did.
Oh, great.
So he helped me with classroom management. Not always. Yeah, not always in the best way.
Okay.
So I remember having a hard time with them, or with one kid in particular, and he said, outside, just wait until we get outside. I'm going to beat you up. And I'm like, no, please, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. So going back to my accomplishment, as we were talking, it came from a failure. And I realized the importance of building connections with students. I realized that you cannot teach if you don't have, if you don't create an environment where students feel part of something, this community. You cannot teach if you don't create a safe environment.
Of course.
You cannot teach if they don't see you as a person, if they're going to look at you as an authority figure, it's not going to work.
I don't know about you, but I think also teaching a language is different to teaching a subject in that case, that you probably need to have a greater connection with the students.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it's all about communication, and you need to be interested in the students. You need to provoke an interest.
Even like personalize, when you're personalizing activities, you know, that's a big part of what we do. So that making them feel that they're safe enough to take risks and share. And that also comes from the teacher as a model, you know. We tend to leave our private life outside. And I learned to bring myself into the classroom, sharing, you know, my challenges, sharing my problems, sharing my fears, showing them.
Did it help that you spoke Portuguese as well, that you were a good model as a language learner yourself?
Yeah. Showing them that I understood what they were saying. And sometimes they communicated with me in Portuguese, and that was okay. They had things to tell me, but they didn't have the language to do it. And it was very important for me to see them as people, as human beings, you know. And if there's that language barrier, I mean, obviously I was fortunate enough to have the language to understand them. But if there's that language barrier, quite often it's difficult to connect because they don't have that language to share things with you, to share their interests and passions. And so I was quite lucky in that sense that I was not afraid to bring in the Portuguese we had Portuguese moments in class, you know, where they could talk.
I think they're needed, they're necessary to make that connection and just to save time as well.
Yeah, it could be at the beginning, we could have like a coffee break. Or at the end, you know, them feelings, you know, that they could come to me and just talk about things, talk about life. So that's talking about going from a failure to an accomplishment, and why I don't think we should be so hard on ourselves when we feel we're a failure. I think we should take that on as a challenge and, you know, be creative and find ways to. It's not always easy. But then I had another experience. As I said, I worked in state schools with students with a lot of baggage. And I had another class the second year that were boys from an institution.
Right.
With stories that were, and I was familiar with their stories because I had to be informed to be careful with the things I did in class and the topics, you know. Family was not a topic I could work on in class, you know. And their stories are they were devastating. I had a student who came from an abusive family, violence, alcohol, and he would still run away from the institution to go home, even though there was that violence waiting for him.
I'm guessing it was because there wasn't anywhere else he could go.
Yeah, it was but it was baffling trying to understand how do you go, how as a child do you run away and go back to the abuse and
that's bizarre.
I had another child who was abandoned by his parents in a forest at 2 years old. At 2 years old. And he was, you know, fortunate enough to be found on the side of the road by somebody. These are heartbreaking stories, you know. And I still get very emotional when I think back to that class. Again, what they needed was not just English.
Of course not.
They needed affection. They needed, again, a community. They needed to feel loved.
That kind of environment, I think the school is very important in providing kind of alternative to.
It's their family. It becomes a family.
The importance of school and friends and other adults that are more kind of responsible or more loving, basically,
Yeah.
is necessary.
Affection is so important. Whether you're working with difficult students and difficult backgrounds or not, I think affection is always
Mhm.
important in a classroom.
Mhm.
So again, it wasn't a failure, but I learned the importance of building that community in the classroom.
Mm.
And that's something that I still do today. That is my priority. And often my colleagues find it strange that I'm always behind with the syllabus. Oh, I never complete syllabus. I always think it's best to build that connection than going into the, I don't know, present perfect or whatever, How important is the present perfect when you need to
Well,
build?
I'm sure the students in your classes get a lot more out of it than just language, obviously.
I hope so, because we spend a lot of time together and it has to be enjoyable.
It's
I
also,
don't like,
as we said before, if students are enjoying themselves in a language class, definitely, then they're going to be more open to learning
and feeling safe. It's that
feeling safe
safety. It's
and
so
having
important.
a good feeling about speaking the language, which will help them in the future have the opposite. If they just go into a language class and they just learn rules and have a practice of a language, it's not that they have any potential, any kind of positive relationship with the language.
Yeah. Just sorry, I just remembered an anecdote. That first class I was telling you about, which I felt like a failure as an English teacher. I did not teach them a single thing in English. I went, it was surviving the whole year.
Yeah, I understand.
But fast forward 10, 12 years later, I was teaching at the university, and it was a course, education course, and it was the first day, it was introductions, right? And this one student said, "You don't remember me, do you?" I'm like, "No," because he was a young adult, I'm like, "No." He said, "You were my first English teacher."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Oh, where? What school?" And he said the name of the school. And I'm like, "Oh my God, please don't be from that class where you saw what a teacher shouldn't be." And I asked him, "Was it the class with so-and-so, so-and-so?" And he said, "Yeah, it was that class." And I fell in love with teaching and English. And that's why I want to become a teacher. And that just blew my mind,
Well, you see, that's so nice to hear that you've had that kind of effect on someone.
Maybe he was lying. Maybe he wasn't telling the truth, but it was just
no. I'm sure that it was true.
It was amazing. And again, as I was saying, failures become accomplishments.
Yeah, I've only had that experience once in my life as a teacher. At the end of a year teaching a group of teenagers, at the end of that course, two of them came up to me and said, "We've decided we want to become English teachers." Aww. And I think it's because we really enjoyed your class and we've learned a lot. And I was like really touched. And
it's because you inspire them, isn't it? And then they learn to love whatever you're teaching. It's such a wonderful feeling.
And one of them looked me up when she became a trainee teacher. She looked me up and sent me a message saying, I've started training to be an English teacher, and this is because of you," which is really touching.
That is the best thing that can happen, isn't it?
It's nice to have those successes as a teacher, because you can, these little wins, these, you really, it's difficult otherwise to understand what you've been able to accomplish, I think, with a lot of students.
And it's not the English.
Yeah. You've provided a kind of role model.
It's not the present perfect. Sorry, no. I keep going on because I hate teaching the present perfect.
I've noticed.
Yeah.
Okay. So Anna, what about, I think you moved from being a teacher to doing some teacher training. Is that right?
Yeah.
Was that a
Well,
natural move
it
into
just
that area?
happened.
Mhm.
Sorry, everything in my life just happens.
Well,
I just let it
it's
happen.
most of our lives. We react to things to what is thrown in front of us, I think.
Yeah, my sorry, I keep going back to my dad. He was such a big
Mhm.
influence in my life, and he always
Mhm.
taught me never say no. No matter how scared you are, just go for it. Give it a try. Doesn't
Mhm.
work, move on. So actually I started taking part in conferences and giving workshops and showcasing my work. And you know, I've always done very, very practical workshops. I don't like giving talks.
Yeah.
So basically, people started seeing me, you know, and attending
Mhm.
my sessions, and that's how my name came out. You know, I don't like saying that, but you know what I mean. People
Yeah.
start getting a feel of you, and
Well, if someone's been to a workshop, they'll tell their colleagues that they recommend it, and then other people will come to your workshops, and that's how it grows.
yeah,
Obviously.
and then getting involved in our Portuguese association for English teachers.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
that was a big deal for me. Because of the work they do, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's a big part. And so also I became more my name was more out there,
Of
and
course.
so people started coming to me, and I used to think, my
Mhm.
God, why me? You know. um so yeah, and I just didn't say no. So I was teaching and doing stuff and going to schools and working with teachers, working with students, and I really enjoyed working with local teachers
Mhm.
and helping them set up projects and training them. And I got involved like with one school in a very, very poor, difficult area, but I
Mhm.
helped the teacher publish a book with students' poems and
Wonderful.
text. And being part of that was like, do you remember I was talking about the guilt?
Yes.
It was
So
those
it's
little things
yeah,
that kind of, I thought, oh, you know, I am, you know, giving back
yeah,
a little
connected.
bit and helping these teachers. So
Mhm.
that's how helped me overcome my guilt, even though it's still there.
And then from teacher training, you moved into writing materials and course books. Was that again
Yeah.
as a result of your work in teacher training? Were you approached, or did
No, it
you?
was, yeah, it's a result of taking part in conferences,
Mhm.
and
So your name was there,
I
and
didn't know that there were editors and people in publishing that were in
talent
these.
spotters, Anna, talent
Yeah,
spotters.
scouts. I had no idea.
They go to
So
conferences and they look for people like you who they think
it's quite
are.
scary. It's quite scary. Now that
So, do you
I
remember the
remember,
first time you were approached by a
yeah,
publisher or an editor?
it was 7 years ago. I don't know. I lose track of time.
Hmm.
And somebody, yeah, my editor, who later became my editor, approached me at the end and told me how much he enjoyed the session. And it was kind of a plenary. I was so scared. Oh my God. There I was on this stage, a humongous auditorium. I got stage fright before going on, and
Right.
anxiety. I still do. But I learned, going back to Bruce Springsteen, I learned that he suffers from anxiety before
Yes, it's
going on
true, isn't it?
stage. Do you remember he talks
Yes.
about his anxiety? And I thought, well, if Bruce can do it, then maybe I can do it. And anyway, sorry, I tend to deviate.
No, no,
And
no, no. It's all good.
that editor came up to me at the end, you know, gave me his card and told me how much he enjoyed the session. I'm like, oh, cool, you know, thank you. I don't know about it, you know, I never got in touch. Then I can't remember how long later I got a call an invitation to work on a course book for 5th grade. He had been to my session, and because my co-author, who was the leader of the project, had also been to my sessions.
Oh, great.
So they were aware of and like I said, my workshops are very practical, and their materials designed that I design, and that I, implement in my classroom. So I have all that feedback. And so yeah, I got an invitation, and I was teaching full time. I was assistant director of studies at International House, and it's a time consuming job. And then but my dad, I could hear my dad saying, "Don't say no, don't say no, give it a chance." And it was really difficult because course book writing is not easy. You think you know how to do it, but I was lucky. I was so lucky. And a shout out here to Claudia Abreu, who was my co-author and leader. She taught me, she believed in me. She knew what I was good at. She could see what I was good at and got me involved in that. She really got me into the creative side of writing, which meant like course books here in Portugal come with an extensive reader, and often they would just use adapt versions of classics, right? But she had this ambition of books written by us, originals. So I wrote readers.
Wonderful.
And that was such a creative writing for children, writing, and also writing the not comprehension, but the exercises to go with the book. And I absolutely hate comprehension activities. I think it kills a book. I think it absolutely kills a book. You should be reading for enjoyment. So that was a challenge, finding activities like placing yourself in the book as a character, writing a letter to a character, seeing things from different perspectives of the character. It was such a creative process. I had to write an end-of-year play that brought on all the language from. This just going back a little bit. This is how my passions,
Yeah,
came back. Theater, music in the classroom. So all of that came into. So I managed to become linked to theater, a rock star in the classroom as well.
There we go.
In a way, no, not a rock star, but you know what I mean.
Getting there, approaching
getting there. Yeah.
So Anna, I'm gonna just because I know you've recently had a big move because you've moved to become a freelance course book writer and editor. I'd love to...
only I'm still working until the end of the month, so I've got a couple of weeks.
So it's quite a move, isn't it, to move from?
Oh, it's so scary! It's terrifying, Graham.
Into freelance. I would love to hear.
I can't imagine a more difficult decision.
So how did you kind of make that decision? Was it a very difficult one to make then?
It was a process. It was a process. I've been working with International House for 25 years. And actually, when I stop at the end of June, marks exactly 25 years, a quarter of a century.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. And it makes me feel old, but it's a long time. And it's a long time. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a long time. I love my school. I love my students. I have such great friends there, but it is a long time. And tragic event. Right. Well, I had a tragic event in my life, which I'm not going to go into, but it led to a serious depression.
Right.
breakdown, because that happens to teachers,
Of course.
mental health. And it's something that we do not talk about enough is mental health.
It's true.
And so much more has to be done to support teachers with their mental health.
There's a lot of strain on teachers, I think, for a lot of them in particular.
And like we're going through a hard time. Again, I'm privileged. I do not take that for granted in my context. But teachers here in Portugal in the public sector, I mean, this has been a year of strikes. It's been a very, very hard year of just demanding respect. We're not even talking about money or, it's demanding respect for the profession. But sorry, going back to what I was saying, I went through severe depression. I had to take sick leave. I went through therapy. And then I decided, well, it's time to go back. And this was all during the pandemic, so that didn't help as well. The pandemic didn't help at all. I mean, a lot of people lived really tragic situations where they weren't able to be with their loved ones in hospital and all of that. Anyway, so I decided to go back into teaching, but I didn't know if I was ready full-time because I lost my self-confidence. I lost everything that I built over the years, It was like going back to scratch. So I thought I'd have to give this an opportunity. So I went back part-time, only as a teacher. So I stopped being ADOS. I thought I'm just going to go back to the classroom and see if I can still do it. But meantime, I'm writing course books at the same time. And also, I have to say that the pandemic made it easier in the sense of webinars, so I was taking part in a lot of teacher training and workshops during the pandemic, which is the good side of it. And so I did part-time this year. It was good to be in the classroom. But then I just started getting offers to do more stuff in writing. And again, I couldn't say no. I don't say no. Bring it on. And it started piling up. And then I had to make that decision. Do I stay in teaching? I can't do both things at the same time. And I thought, well, it's 25 years with the school. Maybe it's time for change. Maybe it's time to bring in younger teachers, because I believe in young teachers and giving them opportunities as well. So I thought I'm going to go into the unknown and see what it brings me, and then all this work, just like I said, things just happen. I don't look for it.
Well, that's wonderful that you're able to have that work and that ability to work as a freelance.
And taking risks, even when you're teaching. Take those risks. Don't stick to the script, try new things, bring your passions in. I
saw that you specializing in writing materials or course books for Mozambique, Angola, and Cabo Verde. I was wondering why those countries, or was that just how it developed?
They were thrown at me. I was like, do you want to do it? And I'm like,
it sounds like fascinating.
I'm so, and again, that's one of the reasons I had to leave teaching, because it involves so much research. I can't even begin to explain. It's so different from writing for the Portuguese market. I know Portuguese teachers, I was a Portuguese teacher in the state school system. I trained teachers in.
What kind of things do you need to really keep in mind for that type of writing materials or course books for that market?
I mean, they're very different markets. We can't think of the African market because each country is different, and you have to look at the reality and the culture of each country. And we have these assumptions, you know,
Of course.
we all do. And, you know, I speak for myself. I had assumptions. I just thought they were all the same, and they're not. So with Cabo Verde, I think that's the first project I worked on. I was invited to do editing with a book. And the interesting thing is that teachers did not have course books in Cabo Verde. It's the first time.
So this is like the first course book for English, is it? Or
yeah, I don't know if it was the first course book in
one
years.
Of the first.
Yeah. But Graham, can you think what it's like to work without a course book? I mean, if I could, I would work without a course book, which is kind of like irony. I mean, I'm into dogme and all of that. I would get rid of the course book. But if you think of teachers not having access to course books and not having access to resources, you know, people living in places where they don't have access to internet. I mean, I was just in awe thinking, how do these teachers work? Again, making me realize how privileged I am and how little I know about other contexts, you know. And I started going to more webinars that involve teachers from these countries, you know, countries in Africa, just to see what they're and I am in awe. My accomplishments are tiny compared to what these teachers do in classroom. So basically, I had to do a lot of research and a syllabus, different syllabus. And the common thing about these 3 countries I'm working with, although they're different countries, but the common thing is they're focused inwards, you know. Unlike, I don't know if that makes sense, like unlike mainstream books that kind of cater to a global market.
It's less of an international aspect.
Yeah, it's just focused on the culture of the country.
Of the country. Interesting.
Yeah. Which, you know, I have mixed feelings, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Like, are you preparing students for the world? Are you preparing the world for your country? Do you see what I mean? There must be a logic there that I'm still trying to. So it just mean I had to learn, and that's what I love about it. I've become a learner. I've become a student once again. You know, wonderful. I have to research weather, geography, biology, food, agriculture, fishing. I never pictured myself becoming a student in my.
So do you think, Anna, do you think the kind of main purpose of this type of English course then is to prepare the students of those countries for people who are visiting from abroad who are going to be communicating with them in English, or is there another reason?
I don't know. Maybe it's even for business purposes. I'm just thinking of international partnerships or work, or commercial. I don't know. I don't really know. Or maybe
what you said about it being sort of inwardly focused, it sounds like it's more people visiting them rather than people of the country going out of their country for international business reasons.
Or I have this other theory. Is that it's lack of representation.
Okay. In the other course books.
Because like with Mozambique, a lot of schools work with mainstream Cambridge. Probably shouldn't be saying this, but there's no representation. They don't see themselves. Think about these course books.
Yeah.
Think about these course.
There's been a lot of discussion, I think, in recent years over course books that are written for international markets tend to be kind of very generic, and
they're generic. They don't represent the reality of. Probably shouldn't be saying this, but I've got a big mouth. These course books, they just stick things in. They what I mean, to be inclusive and diverse,
Yeah.
but I
Well, I
don't
think
really know.
I don't know. I don't know. I think they're responding to needs and trends. I'd like to think that it's more than just sort of box ticking, and that they
Or
are.
maybe it's just starting and they're taking, but these books do not cater to, they don't represent Mozambican people
Yeah.
and
I think that's
who they
probably
are. They're
that's probably because they have to cater for all countries, or or certainly
oh
a
yeah,
lot of course
absolutely.
books have to sort of be. You have to be wary about what you say or what you represent in them, for
Yeah,
fear
yeah.
of upsetting, putting something in about one culture might upset another, etc. We all know that famous acronym. I can't remember what it is now, but the one that avoid pork isms,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
etc.
But you know what? Something I discovered that fascinated me. Go to Shutterstock or
Yeah,
any of these stock images and
yeah,
try to find pictures.
yeah,
Try, you type in a topic,
yeah,
you put African,
yeah,
and try to find the right pictures.
yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of bias.
There is.
I think it's something that everybody is just becoming more aware of, and as we move, it's the hot topic at the moment with, for example, AI, artificial intelligence,
Yeah,
image
yeah,
generation, is
yeah.
that you
I'm
find it.
fascinated.
You
I'm
find it.
fascinated.
There's someone I saw recently who was actually trying to, as an experiment, they tried to get a group of, I think the prompt that they put in was like a group of people from a particular country taking a selfie.
Wow.
And it showed very clearly, when you looked at the variance between these pictures, what the bias of the AI is. But the
wow.
bias of the AI, because it's trained on images tagged with by people on the internet, comes from our own bias, basically.
Bias, yeah. I have that's one of my greatest challenges right now, is finding images. If I type in African, I get stereotypes.
Yeah. What about if you type in do you have that level of the potential of putting in the country names? Would that get you
biased? It's stereotypes as well.
Right.
And very, 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 you get the streets, poverty, you get, that's what you get.
Yeah. So not positive representations, basically.
No, absolutely not. So what do I have to do to get pictures? Stock
commission
images?
them.
Well, budgets.
You can
budget is
get the publisher to send you there to take pictures. That's what you should do.
I end up getting pictures, but I have to type in African American.
Okay, African American. Interesting. Yeah, of course.
That's when even though there are these beautiful pictures that don't represent reality.
It's quite related to what I was saying before. I don't know, again, the idea of using AI is starting to become of interest to publishers for this reason. But I was at a meeting earlier this week in a international NGO organization, a working group that I belong to on technology, and we were talking about AI. And there's a big sort of quandary at the moment because of the lack of images that they have access to that actually represent what they want to represent, and the potential of using AI to generate those images. But the idea of, but they're not real images. So they're not actually the reality. It's someone else.
The reality, exactly.
But even, they're even going to photo libraries, you've seen that they don't provide the reality, even though they're kind of real photos either. So it's kind of a difficult thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very easy to get pictures of like farming. I type in farming, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, what color skin are the farmers, you
yeah.
know?
Are they
It's
not? I'm just being struck by this idea. Are they not sort of? You'd think this kind of gap would be there'd be some organization or individuals that would have tried to sort of bridge the gap and try to build an alternative photo library. Does
well, I
that
think that's a
exist?
great idea because right now I'm so angry.
I can
I'm
imagine.
so, I mean, again, these are things we don't even know.
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
again, the importance of representation, but when you can't find images, for example, for a course
Yeah.
book that represent a certain country,
Yeah.
you know, it's wrong.
Of
It's really
course.
wrong. So something has to be done. I don't know how,
Do
but
they? I'm just thinking that if the publishers have local representation in those countries, then perhaps an easy way would actually for them to commission photos.
yeah, I don't
It
know.
might be more
Again,
expensive.
the
Well, it
problem
would
is
be more
budgets.
expensive.
Like the budgets are limited. I'm working with a book for one of those countries,
Right.
and
But it could be something
the
you might
greatest
want to
the
suggest.
greatest challenge, just
Mhm.
listen to this. They only get the student book. Now they have to work on all the skills, the reading, the writing, the listening.
Mhm.
What happens with listening? And there's no teacher's book. They get no
Right.
teacher's book. They get no answer key, the teachers, and no audio.
Mm.
But they have to work listening skills. So the texts have to be in the course book. The instructions have to be in the course book because that's what teachers get.
Mhm.
So what authors, I'm editing these books, and what authors do is they have the text there and they say, listen to your teacher,
Mhm.
read the text.
So here's something. I know you said the one of the problems is lack of internet, but if there is any potential of access to internet, the taking the texts and creating audios through text to speech is now become really interesting for individual teachers. You could do that.
It
And
depends on where they live. This is public
Right.
education.
Of course.
And I mean, that can come in when I do webinars with these
Yeah.
teachers. I can give them other ideas, but I won't have access.
Of course
So
not. But if
that
that does exist, I can send you a link to a text to speech that I found out
yeah,
at a conference that actually has a lot of representation in different countries around the world. So there are
that'd be great.
accents
Yeah.
speaking English in lots of different countries. I don't know whether they have accents for Mozambique, Angola, or Cabo Verde, but there was
Mhm.
definitely more inclusive than some of the other sites that I've seen.
Mhm. But my greatest challenge right now is how to develop listening skills, which is part of the syllabus.
Yeah.
When the teachers are working with exactly the same course book, they're working with a student book. That's all they
Right.
have.
Of course.
So for example, one suggestion I made to the writer was, and all the instructions, even for the teacher, they have to be in the course book. So the teacher has to
Right.
follow that instruction. So I suggested, well, close your books now and listen to your teacher read a text, write down all the numbers you hear, all the
Right.
farming tools you hear. Now,
Of course.
open the book, read the text, and check your answers. I mean, this is how we try to work around, and that's where I come in, trying to work around these limitations,
Yeah.
you know, and that's where the creative side comes into course
Of
book writing.
course. So Anna, I hate to do this, but time is pressing. The time has just gone talking to you. I'm sure we could end up talking for hours, and it would
And
be
I talk too
fascinating.
much, as I
No,
told you.
no. It's been fascinating. This is what, as I said before we started recording this, it's it's one of the reasons why I do this. It's like it gives me an opportunity to really talk to someone about their work in detail and their experience in the classroom and outside of it. And it's been a great pleasure talking to you about all of this. It's fascinating as well, especially the latest development of the course books for those countries that you're writing for is really interesting. So I hope that we can catch up again sometime in the future, and
Yeah, definitely.
and
And
hear more about this.
yeah,
just
and learning from each other and
Of
finding
course.
ways to overcome certain challenges,
Of course.
Um,
Just to end on, I'm going to
Mm.
ask you if you're a teacher who moved into teacher training, who moved into course book writing and materials writing. What advice would you give other teachers if they wanted to follow that path and be able
yeah.
to become a freelance materials writer at the end of the day or after some time?
Well, I could only give the advice, of my own experience, based on
Of
my own
course.
experience, is get out there, go to conferences, give workshops, showcase your materials, show people what you can do.
Right.
You never know when a publisher is there sitting in the audience.
Of course.
But I don't like bringing business jargon into education. I'm completely against that. But it is kind of building a brand,
Right. Becoming known and
Becoming
becoming known
known.
for, if you want to be a materials writer, then becoming known for someone who writes materials.
Yeah, and don't be afraid. You're constantly asking your students to take risks. Do it. Do it yourself. Don't say no. Get yourself into these workshops. Offer, I remember offering to do teacher training in schools. I offered without being invited. Get out there, show people what you're capable of doing, and for me it's the first step. And enjoy it. Enjoy sharing. Teaching is all about sharing. It's all about learning, and it's also about bringing your passions into the classroom. You might know about so many topics. Bring them into the classroom. Don't be afraid. And always remember, this is more with teaching, always remember you're working with humans. You're not working with students.
Yeah.
And you yourself are a human, and bring your vulnerability into the classroom as well.
You're not teaching a course book, you're teaching people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even though I write the course books.
Yeah, but you can use a course book in a different way.
It's just a tool, grammar.
Delivering material.
It is just a tool. Yeah.
Exactly. So Anna, thank you very, very much for your time. It's been great to finally talk to you about all of this, and I wish you all the best of success. Not that you needed best of luck. Sorry, not that you needed for the next change in your career.
I do need it. But, thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Great.
And thank you for the invitation. It was wonderful.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
Welcome back. I enjoy talking to Anna about Korea, and especially how it's developed. I think it's always interesting to hear about how people become teachers, especially if they become teachers in another country, as is the case with Anna. So I sometimes myself do a double take and wonder how I came to be in Mexico. And I think if I can look at that, I think it's happened in the same way that Anna described, these opportunities pop up in front of you. And even though you may be trying to head off in one way, you find yourself surfing a wave in a different direction. So I think it's certainly true for me. I always thought I'd become a teacher, but my original idea was to start teaching English in Spain before returning to teach in the UK. And for that reason, I decided I wanted to work as an English teacher for a year in Seville in southern Spain, but there weren't any opportunities to study to be a teacher there. So I ended up going to Barcelona. And once there, I thought, why wouldn't I want to stay in Barcelona? And after training to be a teacher, I was then offered a job outside the city in another place, even though I knew I wanted to spend at least a year living in Barcelona itself. So then I was invited to join the year after that another school just outside of Tarragona, which I thought was a nice opportunity and interesting. After a year there, I still had a desire to live at least 1 year in Barcelona, so I moved there and started working there. And that's when I fell for someone, met someone, and then started thinking, why do I want to teach in the UK when I can teach English here? And I realized I didn't particularly want to, so I stayed. 18 years later, then there was an opportunity to head off to Uruguay. And again, I intended to stay for a year, maybe 2 years there at the most. 5 years later, I was still there. Then it was off to Mexico, and this is my 5th year in Mexico here too. So where next? Who knows? I think there are other aspects of my life, professional life, that have surprised me too, but I won't go into that. But I definitely understand what Anna was talking about. So perhaps it's true for everyone. I think it probably is. Okay, so it's that time, folks. We have reached the end of today's Saturday Twilight show. Many thanks to today's special guest, Anna Pires, and to all of you who have joined us live. And also to those of you listening back to the recording, especially to those of you who have managed to stick with us until the very end. I think you to be part of an exclusive club. Let's call it the Saturday Twilight Club. What are the perks of belonging to this club? Well, let's say you can claim a cup of coffee or tea or other beverage from me if we ever meet in person someday, sometime, somewhere. Just introduce yourself and claim it. And so that's it from me for this week. There are Teachers Talk radio shows all week on all manner of interesting topics, so please listen in live or to the recordings. And I hope you will join me next week again at the same time. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.